Woo! I'm telling you, Taras, you can sing to me any time of the day. And of course, thank you all. You're tuned in to Diplomatically Speaking. You're listening to Dr. Brown Metzger this wonderful Sunday afternoon in the early part of the year. Lots going on. 50 years since Selma, of course. Martin MLK's memorial. And I suppose that's on the global and national scale. But we're going to take it down to the community level in this conversation, the relevance of all of that to us in the community. And we have an interesting program. It's been fascinating for me doing the research on this subject, and having joining me in the studio here actually is an expert on the preservation of what he lovingly calls the Rennie Building in Harlem. And so we're going to hear about this amazing structure that was built by Caribbean people back in the early 20s, he tells me, and hear what is going on. And it's an appropriate time really to talk about that history, not only because the building is on the demolition block, but also in the context of the month of January. Again, 50 years since Selma, celebrating Martin Luther King's memorial. And so we want to start off a little bit of a remembrance of his famous I Have a Dream speech. So, Richard, I think you have that queued up for us. Get us in the mood.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Mr. Ken Sargeant, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. I think you told me that it's your first time in the studio since college. We won't tell the audience how many years that was.
It certainly is.
It's really great to have you here. And, you know, I should tell the listening audience that I've known Ken for almost 2 decades now. He's an incredible photographer, artist, and his new iteration is the Harlem Cultural Archives, an organization he has founded, and he serves as president. And his most important project that he's working on at the moment is the preservation of this historic building, which he lovingly calls the Rennie, which is the subject of our conversation today. So, Ken, you tell me you're born in Brooklyn.
I was indeed.
You were born in Brooklyn to West Indian parents?
Indeed.
From St. Kitts, Barbados?
From Nevis.
Nevis and St. Kitts, some tiny country. Those of us from Jamaica, it's like this is a little speck on the map somewhere, if it's on the map at all, from St. Kitts and Nevis. But you also have some Barbadian roots.
I do, going back a generation. Apparently, my grandfather's forebears came over in the aftermath of a great hurricane. They were boatwrights and carpenters, and they came over to help rebuild Nevis back in the 1870s or thereabouts.
Right. Interesting. Well, you were born here, and you were raised in Harlem.
Well, born in Brooklyn, raised there for about 5 years, and then had the privilege of moving into Lenox Terrace as its first.
The famous Lenox Terrace.
When I was 5, my dad was the superintendent, and so that was the start of my Harlem experience. And
and it was interesting because it was at a most fascinating time.
It was indeed,
in Harlem's history. Percy Sutton, go on.
Post-war years, the go-go 50s, things were expanding, and folks had come up with the notion of having luxury housing for African Americans in Central Harlem, and that was what Lenox Terrace was.
All about,
Anna Hedgeman, Ella Baker, people like that were familiar faces in the halls there, and they had a very formative effect on me in terms of giving me a historical perspective and such.
Well, it's almost ironic, really, that with that background, now so deeply immersed in the preservation of another important historical building in Harlem, the Renaissance Ballroom. and Casino.
Yes.
But before we get into that, because I know that's why you're here, and you have your books and you have your notes, and you've been teaching me so brilliantly in the last few weeks as we prepare for this. But I wanted to, since you're here, I've got to exploit the time with you to talk about those years in Harlem with Percy Sutton and all that coterie of black mucky muck in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Share with us some of your experience.
Well, it was kind of part of my everyday experience. I guess I didn't realize quite how privileged I was. Mr. Sutton was the first person to ever address me as Mr. Sargeant when I was about 10 years old. I kind of, who, me?
And he too is of West Indian background, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Yes. So, I mean, it was a unique experience to come up in that environment. I was truly blessed by that, and it kind of informed and shaped my perspective on things in a larger historical context.
Sure. The building, which which is called the Renaissance Ballroom and Casino, which I should tell you is on the slated to be demolished. It is owned by a development company called BRP Corp, formerly owned by the Abyssinian Baptist Church. And lots of controversy about this building at the time. And so Ken is going to fill us in, and hopefully with the objective that those listening who are willing will sign on with Ken and his colleagues to stop the demolition of this important historic building, and to indeed not only stop the demolition, but go on to preservation, to preserving this building for our history, not just black history, but for everybody's history. So Ken, tell us about this building.
Well, in 1918 or thereabouts, several gentlemen from the Eastern Caribbean had emigrated to the United States and decided that they would pool their resources and build a place that would be suitable for weddings, dances, concerts, a theatrical experience.
Now, I got to stop you there, because I know when I sat in the chair as Consul General, one of the agenda items, not just on my agenda, but persons such as Vinnie Hosang, God bless him, really always wanted to see a building in New York that we own, under the banner Caribbean owned, whether it was a foundation or a cultural center or something. I didn't know that we had a building as early as 1920, built by Caribbean people, which we mortgaged, had the money built, and in fact operated as a centerpiece of culture and finance.
We most certainly did. William Roach was the principal. Joseph Sweeney and Cleophas Charity were his associates. They were Antiguan and from Montserrat. And they formed what was called the Sarco Realty Company, and which was built for the express purpose of pooling capital and getting this building done. Once it was built, they formed the Colored American Retail Association in that location on 138th Street. And the Colored American Retail Association had a mission of serving as a catalyst for other black businesses. So essentially what we had on the corner of 138th and 7th was a black Wall Street. It was a cultural engine. It was a business engine. And it became the location for a plethora of different businesses.
So what kind of activities would go on there? Give us some specific examples.
Well, of course, as we established earlier, it was founded as a dance hall. Perhaps the most renowned activity that took place there was the establishment of the Harlem Rens basketball team. Bob Douglas.
Is that the precursor of the Harlem Globetrotters?
Oh, no. The Globetrotters were a Chicago-based team that just adopted the moniker of being Harlem-based. These guys were literally of and from this community.
Oh, really? Interesting.
The Globetrotters were not. The Globetrotters were very showy in their approach. The Wrens were strictly business.
And they were from Harlem.
They were all at that time Harlem residents, but John Isaacs was from Panama. Douglas was from Nevis. Several of them emerged from the burgeoning basketball scene at the time that was taking place in the churches. St. Philip's in Harlem being key among them. They had a very active basketball program, and a lot of the players from that parish wound up going on to bigger and better things. The Wrens barnstormed around the country. They played pretty much any venue that they could. They took all comers, and perhaps the culmination of their very storied career was in 1939. They won the world championship. They were the very best basketball team in the world. Having won 88 consecutive victories. And
at that time, they played against white ball players.
They did. They did at that time.
Interesting. So talk to us about the financial aspect. You said there were like the Black Wall Street. So what kinds of finance activities were happening there?
Well, I had the privilege of encountering a gentleman named Charles Knox Leicester recently, and his grandfather had a tailor shop there. And there was a jeweler nearby. There was a bakery. They all shared a common basement with what was then called the Harlem Exchange. The Harlem Exchange was the home of business, professional networking, the exchange of goods, brokering of numbers, and the exchange of favors for people of color all over the Eastern Seaboard. He recalls seeing doctors, lawyers, artists, mafia, entrepreneurs who would all come there. They could buy silk kimonos from the Far East, export goods here and there. It was literally a Black Wall Street.
And from the politics, there was this kind of a mecca that attracted a lot of the political thinkers and influencers.
And in the process, it kind of became the anchor tenant and created the environment in which the original Red Rooster took hold directly across the street. There was Jock's Place directly across the street, another high-end entertainment venue. Down the block, there was Snooky's Sugar Bowl that had a younger, studious kind of a clientele.
Do you know if Garvey ever was there?
I'm told that he was, yeah. In fact, I think the jury is still out on whether or not Garvey served as a formative agent in this, but
because he came later.
Yeah, but the principals all did in fact come to support him and his work. And it's very clear that the Caribbean footprint and handprints are all over that building.
Well, I love that phrase. In fact, I didn't want to use it. I made a note of it because it's really your phrase. I love that, the Caribbean footprint on Harlem. That's really a fascinating statement because, interesting enough, until the recent census, we're really all incorporated as African Americans. And our good Congresswoman Yvette Clarke advocated and was successful in having that broken out in the census. So you'd have African Americans and Caribbean Americans. We were talking earlier even about the whole Tuskegee group. And I was really very honored that during my tenure, we were able to highlight and identify the Jamaican gentleman who at the time was in his 90s, 94, who served among the Tuskegee, but had been honored at the White House by former President Bill Clinton as an African-American. Yeah, we are all brothers and sisters, but it's just interesting to know that distinction. So here now you have, in the very early beginnings of the African American movement. Let's put aside Reconstruction, because we know what happened there was just really unusual in terms of the economic and political development of black folks, but there was pushback and we seem to have dropped off. But let's start in the early, 20th century. We have Caribbean people coming together to build a center of finance and culture and social activity in the most important black capital of the United States, in Harlem.
Indeed.
And I consider myself someone fairly in the know, and I didn't really know that. So I wonder how many else listening don't know that. And now, fast forward 80 years, the building is coming back again in the public domain, except it's being threatened, and were it not for you and your group, would have been demolished because it's in pretty bad disrepair. Talk to us about the condition of the building at this moment.
Well, it was in active use until about 1979, and at that point, I'm not exactly sure of the mechanics that brought its ownership to the church, but it's been owned by Abyssinian for much of that time. And
so, do you know when Abyssinian first owned the building or acquired the building?
I think they got it in the late 80s, somewhere between 82 and 1990. It was first brought up for landmarks consideration in the early 90s.
Did it ever achieve landmark?
No. It was felt that the process of landmarking it would have placed an ungainly burden on it and would have made it difficult to develop.
Right.
And that was the position that Abyssinian took then.
So was the building ever in use during the time that it was being held by Abyssinian?
The building has not been in use, has been out of active use since about 1980.
Since about 1980. Okay, so it was owned by Abyssinian and really out of active use, and recently acquired. When was it acquired by BRP?
BRP purchased it, I believe it was in April of 2014.
Okay, so really recently, less than a year ago. And their plan, of course, is to develop the land on which it sits.
They filed permits to demolish it almost immediately.
And to build a 124-unit apartment complex.
Exactly.
On it. I think some 20% of it will be for people below the poor people.
Yeah, 80% market and 20% stabilized.
Which is a good cause. We're talking about providing housing for black folks, who 20% of them, are looking for this type of housing in order to have a decent place to live. So the cause is noble. However, when you're talking about a historic site, you wonder if our interests aren't being better served through the preservation of the building around which we could still have that's market usage.
That's precisely the point. These two things are
not mutually
exclusive at all. And in fact, we've seen in various cases with the Audubon Ballroom, an existing archival period building that had fallen into disrepair, was brought back to life and is a center of vitality up on Broadway. They built above it at the corner of 135th Street where Small's Paradise used to exist. They have built a high school atop the Small's Paradise building. That process is commonly known in the industry as adaptive reuse. You assess the condition of a structure, you salvage the iconic period, irreplaceable details, and then you incorporate the things, the amenities that your design calls for atop and within.
Right, and that's your objective. The point is you're not standing in the way of progress and commercial activity.
That is
you just want to do that as well as preserve the history of this important building.
Exactly. I mean, we encounter so many aspects of Harlem's history that are simply commemorated by a street sign. And we walk by and we say, well, this used to be here, and that used to be there.
And that's what we're saying to our grandkids. We can't show them anything, but that's what we're saying to them.
This building is so important that it just simply can't be allowed to be destroyed.
Let's take a break here. We have a lot more to say on this. Want to drill down a little bit further in the plans for the building and more into the work of what our wonderful guest, Ken Sargeant, is here to talk about today. We're going to go to a music break. But first, let me remind you that you're listening to Diplomatically Speaking. I'm Doc Brown Metzger on WVIP 93.5 FM. And we want to acknowledge and thank our sponsors at this time, beginning, of course, with Tower Isle Frozen Foods.
Flavor of the Caribbean to America with Tower Isle's Jamaican-style patties. Available at your local supermarket in beef or chicken. Tower Isle's is the leading manufacturer and distributor of Jamaican-style patties and has led the industry in quality food products for more than 45 years. Tower Isle's patties are made with the best ingredients. Grade A USDA beef and chunky white chicken breast. Great for a snack or purchase them for your wedding, party, or your restaurant. Enjoy a Jamaican-style patty from Tower Isles. Give them a call at 678-422-3196. That's 678-422-3196. And don't forget to check your local supermarket for Tower Isle's Jamaican-style patties.
And Caribbean Life newspaper, the largest Caribbean diaspora newspaper in North America, keeping us up to date and up to speed, and diasporadashboard.com. Ken just showed me this incredible copy of a newspaper article from the New Doc Age. The byline is the National Negro Weekly, Saturday, July 21, 1923. And the lead story here is Commercial and Business Exposition to be held by Harlem Trade Association. And the venue is at the Rennie.
Absolutely.
It's at the this Renaissance Ballroom and Casino. And according to information given by William H. Roach, one of the persons you mentioned here is responsible for establishing the building, president of Sarco Realty Holding Company and proprietor of the Renaissance Casino, who is managing and directing the first annual Negro Commercial and Business Show promoted under auspices of the Association of Trade and Commerce. When the doors are open on Monday, July 23rd, the public will be surprised at the development of business and commercial enterprises conducted by members of the race.
They were an enterprise zone, to coin the popular phrase. They collaborated, they stirred the pot, they were a catalyst, they were just a business engine. It was incredible what this group of first-generation immigrants were able to accomplish. I'm assuming.
Yeah, very interesting to just look back at this history. I'd asked you earlier, you don't know if Garvey even was on the scene here. I would assume he would have been at the building, but this was certainly before Garvey actually came on the scene in earnest. Mm-hmm. So quite conceivably, this could have been a very important venue. Where is the archival history for the building?
I suspect that you'll find quite a lot of that material at the Schomburg and probably in other institutions. New Haven has a significant Caribbean population, so it wouldn't surprise me if Yale had certain holdings related to that. I haven't explored the Yale archives, but I will very shortly be doing some digging in the Schomburg to see exactly what they do have.
Yeah. Well, if we haven't said this before, the objective here is not just to give our listening audience this vital information, but it's to urge them ultimately to take a stand, to take a position. Do you want to just tell us now how, for those who may be interested in signing a document to stop the demolition, what they might do?
Sure. There is active protesting taking place every week at that location. And there is a paper petition that's being circulated. And there is an online petition that now has close to 4,500 signatures on it.
So when you say, let's take it one at a time, so when you say active protest, do you mean an actual picket line at the building?
There is a picket line on 7th Avenue.
And 138th Street?
At 138th Street.
Every week?
Every week.
Wow.
Yeah.
With people who were saying, we do not want this building torn down.
Absolutely.
So persons can just turn out, take a picket, put their time in, and another group will take over. Fantastic. So that's one way persons can support.
And again, there's an online petition on change.org for people who are really interested in getting into the details. At your command line, type in hashtag Save the Rennie, and that will take you to a host of different articles and commentary on the topic. But I would suggest that anyone who takes an interest in this, if you can write your legislator, particularly if you're New York based, and if you're from parts far afield, if you can sign our petition. Obviously, being political, New York votes count for more, but I think it's also very important from the standpoint of cultural tourism that New York politicians understand that this is not just a local issue. This is an issue that resonates around the world. There are dancers all over the world who are up in arms over the fact that the home of the Lindy Hop is being destroyed. There are basketball aficionados all over the world who are upset that the home of the motion offense is being destroyed. And again, there are preservationists who strictly have an affinity for the care, the detail, the construction, that the remarkable construction that was accomplished by people of modest means and oversized ambition who were able to accomplish this almost 100 years ago.
It was a black architect who designed this, isn't it?
I believe so. His name was Creighton Ingalls.
I
haven't been able to find much in the way of information on where he was from. Vertner Tandy was the architect of greatest name at the time. He designed Madam C.J. Walker's home and such. Ingalls was a theatrical specialist and did a lot of theaters. I'm assuming it would be out of character for them to have been doing business with anyone other than black people. So my assumption is that Ingalls was in fact black.
Right. And there are people still living who recall activities.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you talked with any of these people?
I have indeed. I had the pleasure of interviewing an 84-year-old dancer named Taja Murtaugh, who was one of the Apollo show dancers, and she recalls it very vividly. Norma Miller, who dance aficionados credit with being perhaps the best Lindy Hopper ever. She's the one that you see being propelled into the air. A real athlete. Norma Miller, I guess, is now 94 years old, still very, very active, still dancing, and still recalling the heydays of the Lindy.
And I need to remind folks, too, that this all makes sense in terms of the importance of the building and the level of activity, because we're talking about the 20s, which is an American cultural history, is a very robust time in terms of dance in particular, and really popular culture coming into its own with the Lindy Hop and so on. And since we had segregation, this was where black folks went. We hear about the Apollo, yes, but the Renaissance and Casino Ballroom is where a lot of that activity
You're very astute on that point. At the time, you had various outlets, Connie's Inn being one. There were a host of places that were built for and by white folks. This was unique in the fact that it was built by black people, for black people, at a time when our entertainment venues and outlets were very limited. Also interesting is the fact that the term the Harlem Renaissance did not enter the popular parlance until probably the mid to late 1920s. The term back then was the New Negro. So,
but this was a little ahead of its time. It's called the Renaissance Ballroom and Casino.
The Renaissance was the Renaissance before the Renaissance.
That's the point.
How could you tear such a thing down?
Incredible. And then, of course, we know the Apollo for the venue, cultural and performance venue, but the Renaissance had that ability to host shows, but it was also kind of a conference room. The Urban League, the NAACP, debutantes, private theme parties and events, important roundtable discussions were held at this venue.
And in terms of, doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, Paul Robeson, Zora Neale Hurst, Du Bois, literally anybody who was anyone at the time made their way through the Rennie. It was just that kind of place. It was the crossroads of Harlem, for lack of a better word.
Is that why the Abyssinian Church took it over? Or do you know the intention of the Abyssinian Church? Was it to preserve the building at that time?
The church's intention was, in fact, to preserve it and to do what I've referred to as an adaptive reuse.
Right.
That was their intention. Difficulties arose in raising money, and then I think probably the nail in the coffin, as it were, occurred with the recession of 2008. Portfolios lost great value. They were then placed in a position of, not being able to afford the vision that they had initially
intended or envisioned, we're not here to beat up anybody, but I've just got to ask the question. You don't have to answer it. It just is a little surprising to me that there was no outreach to the Caribbean community, who obviously would have had an interest by dint of the fact of who established the building. To the West Indian community to say, listen, this is what's happening. The building is kind of on the verge. We acquired it with noble intentions. We're struggling. We can't do it. Can you partner with us? Maybe that was done. Did you know whether there was any outreach?
I kind of get the sense that their approach was insular. The Abyssinian Development Corporation has successfully executed a number of developments within the community, and I think in their humble opinion, they felt that they were capable of bringing this to conclusion. They resisted efforts to landmark it under the theory that the additional regulations of that process would have made development prohibitively costly. And in some ways, their best of intentions may have been the undoing of the building, because without that protection, it's now left to the will of the developer to determine its fortune, and unless sufficient pressure is applied to the developer to realize that the community's interests in some case have to be weighed as well. They'll simply do what's expedient from a monetary standpoint.
But the fact is that just 4 years ago, the Harlem Community Board 10 passed a unanimous resolution that was dispatched to the Landmarks Preservation Committee, urging that 10 buildings in Harlem be preserved. The Renaissance is among that 10, right? Or no?
I'm not familiar with that specific recommendation. I know that the Municipal Arts Society recommended that it be landmarked at about the same time. I'm not exactly sure what the community board's position was on that.
Just for the edification of our listeners, those 10 would include the Essenbaum Building, the Lee Brothers Building, the Hotel Olga, which is Harlem's leading black-owned hotel from 1920 to 1937, the Marion Building, the Harlem YMWCA, the Harlem Hospital Nurses and Administrative Building, and the Renaissance Casino. I was wondering if you have any update on that. Well, you just told me they have not achieved this preservation status.
No, in 2007, again, it was brought up for landmark consideration. And again, the church was very vocal in its opposition to
grant it such status. Yeah, because I know from, being a part of a church that is 225 years old, you can't do anything to the building unless you go before this powerful preservation board, even on paint color. So for a developer, that's really going to be a bugaboo in the way of development. So here it is now. It's fallen on hard times. The building has been sold to a company, listen, I don't know, I'm saying they want to move on and make their money. And it's in threat of being really lost to us, lost to our community forever. And so we've got to do something about this. How are your efforts going? I know what you hope to achieve, but where are things right now at this minute?
About a week ago, as a result of the various petition efforts and the protests, the developer was asked by Community Board 10, I believe it is, to attend a land use meeting and to make clear what their objectives are. Because, frankly, there's a lot of misinformation circulating. There are many people in the community who are not aware that this property is up for demolition.
And why is that? Why?
It seems to be kind of a closely guarded
what's that about,
secret. It's I don't want to. I don't know. I literally don't know, but there are people.
Why isn't this in the papers? Why isn't this in the community news?
Well, it is getting.
It's now coming out because of the effort of your group. Yes, I'm seeing that. But I mean, in the last
making a lot of noise,
right since 2008, though. I look back. You see me sitting here with papers, and I didn't really see that much in 2008, 2009, 2010.
I think everybody was always under the impression that Abyssinian was going to get the job done. They were it was going to get fixed.
I see.
And I've walked past it 100 times, and every time it's in a little bit shabbier condition.
Right.
And
now you tell me basically you're waiting on the decision as to the condition, the official condition of the interior, whether it's salvageable or not.
BRP's contention is that the interior is unsalvageable, and I will not take issue with them on that because the roof has been compromised and
when you rain and weather getting in there.
When you see trees growing out of the top of the building, it kind of suggests that things are not boding well for. So
let's be realistic. Is any of the buildings salvageable? I know you're not an architect.
I'm not an architect, but based on my knee-jerk appraisal of the exterior,
you want to err on the side that it is and be proven that it's not.
I would say that the exterior, that the shell is salvageable and not only is salvageable, but should be preserved.
Everything should be done to make this. I don't know the protocol here, but is there a law in preservation world that requires a developer, that would require by law for a developer to salvage what it can salvage? Or is that a completely commercial-driven decision?
I think absent a finding or absent a landmark status, the developer is free to do whatever is within the limits of the law. So I don't think that there is anything that would compel them to do so unless, there may well be some things of which...
So therefore the objective of the picket and the petitions is to bring community pressure to bear on the developer to reverse their decision.
Exactly. Just because you have the right to do something does not make that the right thing to do.
And community pressure can help to change the direction of that decision. Is it your sense, how much pressure would be necessary to have an impact to reverse the decision on this? In other words, can BP just say, forget it, I'm going to knock it down? So are they now holding to wait to see what comes out of your work, your efforts?
Well, as a result of our efforts to date, they've agreed to sit down and talk.
Good.
The results of that discussion, I think, will depend largely on who they're talking to. If, for example, Mayor de Blasio decides that he wants to talk about it, I think they'll...
Well, we have some very powerful West Indians, Caribbean people around de Blasio. There is a group called Caribbean People for de Blasio. We helped him win. Mm-hmm. There is Una Clark, kind of the mother of our community. There is, of course, Congresswoman Yvette Clark, her daughter. And there are some very key and connected Caribbean folk that are close to de Blasio. Have they reached out to you? Have you reached out to them?
I have not reached out in any way directly to the Caribbean community, mm-hmm. except through social media, mm-hmm. and I've been engaged in a very active effort to reach whoever I can through that avenue.
Well, that's why you're here today. You want to be able to do that.
Exactly, but no, I've not had any discussion with either of the Clarks with respect to this. We would love to have their ear, and if you can in any way connect us, that would be a real positive for.
It would be my pleasure. I just cannot imagine that real estate with a kind of historical background and provenance in Harlem, the icon of African American culture, built by Caribbean Americans when we are at the time calling for the fact that we need a building, a home where we can reside, cultural archives where we can convene thinkers and influencers, community leaders, community organizations, that we are crying for such a building. And here is a building with a history and a provenance like the Renaissance and Casino Hotel with the greats, possibly and more undoubtedly even Garvey, who's kind of the father of Caribbean American political culture and movement, and that we not be engaged in this process of saving and preserving. This would be criminal. So I am going to do everything I can to support this activity and to engage not only our community political leaders, but our entrepreneurs. I would want to be able to reach out to, the best and the brightest, the wealthy folks like Vinnie Hosangs of Royal Caribbean and Lowell Hawthorne of Golden Crust and Verona Greenland of Morris Heights Healthcare Center and all of those who have power and resources to assess the situation and see if they cannot throw their support behind this.
Well, that would be a wonderful thing, because I think that this building, having fallen so far down on its luck, does not present well. It's easy to walk past it and not pay it any attention. And I think that's precisely what people have done. And but when you take the historical gravitas, the sheer weight and magnitude of everything that has transpired there, it would really be criminal.
Be absolutely shame. In the last minute that we have, why don't we quickly give our listening audience contact information where they can get more information, perhaps sign a petition?
Well, you could certainly visit harlemcultural.org.
harlemcultural.org.
We will have ongoing information there.
You said something about hashtag
Save
the Rennie.
No spaces.
Hashtag Save the Rennie, where you can actually sign a petition.
You'll be able to find the change.org petition there, and we're really looking to bolster those numbers. I think if we can move up from approaching 5,000 to approaching 10,000, that will certainly will be hitting with a bigger hammer.
That would be incredible. Well, Ken, let me tell you, we could go on and on about this. I know you have a lot to say. You've been so schooled on this issue. Let me thank you on behalf of the community for stepping up, really, and taking on this formidable task and putting in so much time with your colleagues to preserve this building. And it's my prayer that you and your group will succeed. And I will pledge, I will do everything that I can to help, including to try and connect you with the persons I mentioned earlier to come and support. At least assess this. At least come down and see what's going on, and not wake up a year from now and it's knocked down and say, why didn't anybody tell me? So let us at least endeavor to get that done. We're coming down to our last minute here. Richard, I want to thank you so much for all that you do to make this program program possible on the air every Sunday. Ken, you're the best. This is Doc Brown Metzger. You've been listening to WVIP. I want to thank our sponsors going out of here. Of course, Tower Isle Frozen Foods, Caribbean Life newspaper, and diaspora-dashboard.com. Walk good. I'll see you next Sunday, same time, same place.